Hey everybody, it's 3 o'clock. It's Tuesday. That means it's Tech Tuesday. I will be back in just a moment, and I'll be talking about the latest in broadband news for broadband service providers. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Tech Tuesday. So today I'm going to talk about some recent articles that I think would be of interest to broadband service providers. So if you have any comments, if you start watching this live, want to make any comments on any of these things that I'm talking about, feel free to join in on YouTube chat. So we see here fiber investment forecast to surpass $125 billion over the next 5 years. So is this really surprising? I don't think so, considering all of the federal money that's out there right now for broadband infrastructure projects, plus the pending dollars that are coming out with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That will be adding additional money probably in 2023. So it's not that surprising to see this forecast, as lots of companies right now are laying fiber, including cable companies, and lots of them are planning on doing that as they're looking forward to a lot of these federal dollars. So the U.S. fiber investment forecast from RVA LLC calls for service providers to spend $125 billion over the next 5 years, exceeding the total amount that has been invested in fiber since providers first began deploying it. So that tells you how big that is. $125 billion includes money allocated in government programs. So they are taking into account money that is and will be allocated via those programs. The largest of these programs is the BEAD program. That's the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. That's a portion of that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, specifically $42.5 billion. To go toward broadband deployments in unserved, primarily rural areas. That would be unserved and underserved. So unserved would be 25 by 3, anything less than 25 by 3. Underserved would be anything less than 100 by 20. That's where that money is first going to be allocated towards. RVA doesn't expect deployments from the BEAD money to become significant until 2024, which is interesting, and a good portion of the spending will not occur until after 2026. Now, it is very likely that the money will not, or that the grant process won't start taking place until 2023, early 2023, based on the timeline. The notice of funding opportunities are going to go out sometime around mid-May, and then you've got a lot that's going to be going back and forth between the states that are the grantees. They're going to be working with sub-grantees in each state, and then they got to get back to the NTIA that's managing this program. So I certainly could see, I guess, where the money doesn't become significant as far as what's actually being allocated to start building until, let's say, 2024. A good portion of the spending will not occur, they say, till after 2026, and that's probably, I guess, maybe just the length of time it takes to get fiber in the ground and everything else. So that seems a little bit far out there, I should say, but we'll see. Strong fiber deployment is expected to continue well into the 2030s, so this is something that will continue for quite a while. And you can see that happening as well because, cable operators right now are weighing what they're going to do as far as, how do they start moving forward into the future with their networks. And a lot are talking about DOCSIS 4.0, also called 10G, kind of synonymous. And, or do they go on the path of just really taking the most advantage out of DOCSIS 3.1, which can take them quite far if they do high splits and, raise their spectrum up to 1.8 gigahertz. They can do quite a bit in the way of getting very fast downloads speeds and also significantly much faster upload speeds if they do DOCSIS 3.1. So there's a lot going on there, but also as these cable operators look to the future, a lot of them are looking really out to the future at looking at fiber to the home as being primarily what they're going to be doing, certainly on greenfield as they edge out their territories or go into new territories. They're doing fiber to the home. But eventually, as time goes on, and maybe 2030's time frame, they're going to be looking at, several of them now are even looking at overbuilding their infrastructure right now where they have HFC. So they're in the mix as well. We believe there's overwhelming evidence that end-to-end fiber has the best performance of any internet delivery method, and that the majority of providers now realize it's in their best interest to build fiber as quickly as possible. And that would certainly, again, include some cable operators doing greenfield right now. Telephone companies continue to lead the charge on fiber deployment. Cable companies are also increasing their fiber investment, as are rural electric co-ops, private competitive companies, and to some extent municipalities. And I think certainly not just to some extent, especially as, again, these new infrastructure dollars become available later in the year, early next year. Although he did not provide specifics, Render noted that the new RVA fiber investment forecast shows the percentage of rural builds rising over the 5-year forecast period and the average deployment cost rising as well. So that's just a factor of it getting more difficult to deploy fiber. I would expect that once we get past the this inflationary period that we have and the supply chain issues, and we start to have more fiber available, which might take a few years, fiber and fiber equipment. But once we get past that, I would see the cost of that stuff coming down, although the cost of deploying it's going to be going up, because right now a lot of fiber operators, where they're putting fiber is in the easy areas. They're going where it's very dense. And again, these infrastructure dollars are going to help them go out further into these areas that are less dense. But as you go out further, then your costs are going to rise. So I think they're seeing the connection here of rural bills and rising deployment costs. Let's see. So here's a story about AT&T wants to cut its copper footprint in half by 2025. So this is kind of related. Talking about what AT&T is doing. AT&T execs revealed that the operator is working to reduce its copper footprint by 50% by 2025, planning to reinvest savings from the decommissioning effort to grow its fiber and 5G networks. And this is very similar to what a story that I talked about, might have been last Tuesday, I think, with Verizon is doing the same thing. So they're also trying to get copper out of their plant and get fiber in their plant to, again, improve speeds, but also reliability as well as reduce costs. Obviously, there's a cost in putting it in, but then you've got reduced costs over time. Though the project is still in its early stages, AT&T has already dismantled over 9,000 network elements and reduced over 4 billion in annualized kilowatt hours to date. Around 20% of AT&T's network footprint, or about 16 million locations, is served by fiber today. By 2025, McElfresh said AT&T is aiming to boost that figure to cover 75% of its network with either fiber or 5G. The operator plans to roll out wireless-based catch products in former copper markets where it doesn't deploy fiber to serve customers who might otherwise be left out in the cold due to its copper retirement plan. I don't know specifically if they're talking about, when they say wireless-based catch products, if they're talking about 5G fixed wireless, if they're talking about maybe 5G mobile service. I think it might be more related to mobile. We'll see here in another story related to this same event. So AT&T CFO Pascal Desroches noted it plans to spend between $3 billion and $4 billion per year on fiber as it works toward a previously announced target of covering a total of 30 million homes with the technology by 2025. The operator added that 2.6 million new fiber locations in 2021. Going forward, executives said AT&T expects to add between 3.5 million and 4 million new fiber passings each year on the way to its goal. So they are obviously moving forward there. And as I said, there's a related story here. On path to provide America's best broadband, AT&T may edge out and overbuild. So now that AT&T's divestiture of Warner Media is imminent and the company's revamped its strategy, a key element of that strategy is to be America's best broadband provider, said CEO John Stankey. And again, this was that same investor conference webcast. Expanding fiber broadband capable of multi-gigabit symmetrical speeds will underpin that strategy. The company plans, and this is kind of a repeat, plans to double its fiber footprint by 2025 when it will have broadband available to 25 million consumers, 4 million small businesses, and 1 million enterprises. Wherever fiber goes, wireless follows, he said. So another key element of this new strategy is 5G, which will be supported by dense fiber infrastructure. Now this is interesting here, unlike competitors, Verizon and T-Mobile, however, fixed wireless access won't play a big role in AT&T's plans. So it sounds like the 5G that they're offering, they're doing similar things with Verizon as far as C-band, mid-band spectrum, but it sounds like they're really wanting to apply that to their mobile customers, as opposed to a fixed wireless play in various markets. So he offered a veiled challenge to those competitors when he said, "We're not attempting to support terabytes of monthly consumption using wireless. We chose to preserve wireless spectrum assets to remain competitive for high-value wireless transactions." By wireless transactions, he apparently meant mobile transactions, echoing a recent independent financial analysis that showed mobile service having substantially better margins than fixed wireless. And he says here, the terabytes reference is based on AT&T's forecast for average household broadband data consumption to jump from 900 gigs today to 4.6 terabytes by 2025. So they're seeing that with this growth in broadband data usage that they don't think the wireless network's going to be able to support that. So they're wanting to keep fiber for that, and then just when I say wireless, I mean fixed wireless for more home usage. They want to do fiber as opposed to fixed wireless. And you can see here there's a little chart here. So they say fiber remains economical as data consumption increases. They've got cost to serve by monthly consumption. So you've got wireless with spectrum and wireless. I'm not sure the difference there unless they mean with licensed spectrum, because wireless is going to have spectrum, but we've got wireless with spectrum and wireless, and you can see the lines pretty much go up at the same kind of pace, maybe a little bit higher with spectrum. Maybe that means maintaining the cost of that license. But then you look at fiber here, and this is as you go from 25 gigabytes to 5 terabytes, you can see that fiber remains fairly flat, really relatively flat compared to what you've got with wireless, with spectrum and wireless as far as your ongoing costs as you get up to these really high data consumption amounts. Today there are 50 million urban and suburban households and 10 million businesses that could use fiber broadband but not have it available to them. So that's offering strong growth. He also suggested that as we continue to scale our current fiber build, and the more we compete, the more economical it gets. The capital investment per location is lowered with densification, while returns improve with penetration. But again, that has to do with how dense the area is. So, it's different. As I was talking about on a broadcast, I think just yesterday, maybe it might have been that, if you've got these, huge farms or whatever, in particular states where you've got just, one customer for every 10, 20, 50 miles, then it's very difficult to have it make economical sense, especially maintenance-wise. If you can get funds to build that out, that's okay, but then you got to maintain that plant. So that's not dense. It's the opposite of densification right there. Let's see. While AT&T's fiber deployments to date have focused on the company's traditional local landline service footprint, that's beginning to change a little bit and could change more in the future. Edging out from our traditional footprint to adjacent areas is something AT&T is already doing, although we don't advertise it, Stanky said. So if they're in a particular service area and they see an adjacent area where it looks like they could edge that out and offer service, they are doing that today, and sounds like they'll continue to do that. The company would consider fiber deployments farther away from its traditional footprint if there was a business case for it, Stanky said, noting that government subsidy programs could play a role there. So again, if they're looking at a particular area, they've got a service area, but then there's somewhere else that's not really adjacent or too close to that, they're going to be looking at those unserved and underserved areas, probably related to the BEAD program and those federal dollars that are going to be available, and looking at a way that they could fund that and put service in a totally new area. What about Verizon? What are they doing with C-band? As I mentioned, AT&T says they're not really looking at C-band for home use, for fixed wireless use, but more for mobile. Well, Verizon is taking the opposite tactic. Verizon CFO Matt Ellis told an investor conference the operator's C-band network has garnered usage of between 5% and 15% after almost 2 months of operation, touting benefits to quality of experience along with coverage. The operator is relying on C-band to boost coverage of its fixed wireless access service, employing spectrum between 3.7 gig and 3.98 gigahertz to bridge gaps between its low band and millimeter wave holdings. So low band is not really fast, much better than LTE, 4G service, but and then millimeter wave, that's where you need a very dense area. You can put up small cells in an urban area where you've got very little distance you can cover with millimeter wave, but if you've got the small cells, then you can get line of sight, then you can get enough customers for it to make sense. But mid-band is the sweet spot, and they're looking at that C-band spectrum that they acquired as really being able to boost their 5G service throughout the country. Ellis stated that the C-band network was delivering peak data rates of around 900 megabits per second, and Verizon expects to break the 1 gig per second mark when the spectrum is paired with its other holdings. So that's an interesting little tidbit there. So they say they're getting rates around almost a gig, 900 megabits per second. Now that's probably cherry picking some really good areas, delivering peak data rates. It's very likely that in other areas it could be 400, 300, somewhere in that range. But that's still really good, and it's well above what would be required for an area to be considered served under all of these infrastructure dollars that are available both today and that are coming, because there again The underserved would be anything less than 100 by 20. So they're looking good there. Verizon expects to have fixed wireless available to 50 million homes and 14 million businesses by the end of 2025, with subscriber growth of 4 million to 5 million subs. Ellis said that the company expects net additions of more than 150,000 in the current quarter, more than double the number of Q4 2021. And that's not surprising because, again, with the C-band acquisition, they can get this spectrum out much more quickly. While it's not in as dense an area, they can cover a lot more ground. And it's not like a millimeter wave where it's just little small pockets. I mean, they can cover a lot of ground here with C-band, so they are looking at that as being something that can get a lot of subscribers from. Now, it does need to be in areas that probably don't have good service already, because if you got a wire coming to your home and you're happy with your broadband, you're probably not. If you get a postcard from Verizon, you're probably not going to go through the hassle of switching over to them for a C-band, I should say a 5G based service. I mean, some people will do it, but I think it's going to be mostly in areas that have issues today with getting broadband, where they're going to see some of that subscriber growth. For cable operators, wireless gets real. Now, this is talking about not fixed wireless, but this is talking about mobile service. The fact that cable operators, have been for a while providing a wireless service, mobile phone service as part of a bundle. A lot of times they don't have that infrastructure themselves. They're reselling somebody like a Verizon, under their own brand, and that's actually, I think, what Charter is doing, which we'll read about here in a minute. But what they're saying here is Q4 performance shows products becoming a legitimate revenue profit center. Cable wireless service, initially believed to be a retention tool for broadband, is quickly becoming a revenue and profit center in its own right. So offering this service in a bundle was a way for cable operators to fight off some of these challenges from a mobile operator. Somebody like a Verizon that comes in that can offer you, they've been in the mobile business forever, right? But they come in with a fiber product and they can bundle in their wireless product, and they have got, Fios TV product, and so they can do the same things that the cable company can do. So the cable companies were getting into the mobile business, again, either on their own networks, building it, or a lot of cases, in many cases, going through this kind of virtual mobile service through providers like Verizon. So since launching their respective wireless offerings in 2017 and 2018, both Comcast and Charter have amassed a collective 7.6 million wireless customers, and growth rates keep rising. In Q4, both Comcast and Charter reported their best quarterly subscriber growth ever, as expansion continues into more rural areas through edge-outs, fiber extensions, and federal programs. That pace isn't expected to slow anytime soon. So you can see kind of the convergence here of, you're basically, in different areas, you're going to have either somebody that was a cable company at one point that's providing broadband over maybe HFC, their hybrid fiber coax network, or they've just completely deployed fiber to the home, but they were traditionally a cable operator that was providing cable TV. That's how they got started. Or you've got somebody like a Verizon or other telco like an AT&T that was strictly a telephone company providing phone service, right? Plain old POTS, plain old telephone service, that then added broadband through DSL and then fiber and added video. So they're all kind of converging. And eventually, I think everybody's going to be, everybody's going to be probably offering fiber, and everybody's going to look the same. So it's getting to that point. Let's see. According to Charter, the mobile business had negative earnings. Their estimated revenue, what is this again? Before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, so EBITDA, of $92 million in Q4. For the year, negative $311 million. Deficits are getting better, though. It's negative $401 million in 2020 and negative $520 million in 2019. So it's been better over time. And there's another story about this here from the Charter CEO. He says the new bundle is broadband and mobile. So this again is something that they're seeing as their new bundle, not just internet and video and maybe VoIP, traditional VoIP service, but mobile service as well. An interview Wednesday. Actually, let me switch down here. So instead of traditional linear cable TV, Charter says mobile, based on resold Verizon capacity, augmented with the company's network of Wi-Fi hotspots, and eventually its own licensed CBRS 5G spectrum as the new counterpart to its core cable broadband service. And that's an interesting thing here about the 5G CBRS spectrum, because with CBRS, And this is something that would be, you don't have to be a Comcast or a Charter, because you can get unlicensed CBRS spectrum, and you could use that for mobile service. And again, it's unlicensed spectrum, so you didn't have to go out and buy licensed spectrum to do that. Now, I would imagine that Charter has got the licensed version of that, so they've got the priority access licenses, but there's still general access licenses as far as CBRS. So even a smaller cable operator could get into the business by reselling excess capacity from somebody like a Verizon, or they could do it completely or augment that with CBRS spectrum in their area as well. They say we have an opportunity to package that with great broadband, actually save customers money at the household level with that bundle. Mobile remains the smallest part of Charter's residential business. At the end of 2021, it counted 28.1 million Spectrum broadband customers, 15.2 million Spectrum video customers, and 8.6 million Spectrum voice customers. And that would be, assuming like a VoIP product, and then 3.4 million Spectrum mobile customers. But Rutledge emphasized mobile's potential upside, noting that its cable services footprint encompasses some 120 million people who subscribe to one wireless service or another. So they're saying they got 3.4 million now. So he's saying 120 million is still 117 million more than we have. So they've got a lot of potential there he's looking at. What about their fixed broadband? He was also quizzed about Charter's competitive position relative to fiber optic providers, without naming Verizon, its primary such rival, and yet also the backbone of its mobile service. So Verizon is their main rival, but yet they're also, again, reselling capacity on the mobile service. Rutledge replied that Charter, which already sees 25% of its broadband-only customers using a terabyte or more of data a month, felt no need to stage a matching fiber build-out. We have a lot of fiber in our network, he said, citing its reliance on fiber and federally subsidized rural build-outs. So where they're getting subsidized, they're building out with fiber. That said, we have tremendous capacity in our existing infrastructure and at a very cost-efficient way to continue to upgrade our capabilities. So he's talking about their HFC network, and again, there's a lot of life left in that if you expand the amount of spectrum that you have, and you can do that. You know, one thing that cable operators really need to start thinking about, this can make the biggest difference for them, is their QAM-based video. Now, I don't recommend they completely get out of the QAM-based or out of the pay TV business by getting rid of their QAM video. But if they get rid of their QAM video, they can make a tremendous increase in the spectrum that they have available, and then start to offer faster speeds on the download as well on the upload side. You know, you could reclaim 50% of the QAM plan, I believe, if you get rid of that video and, let's say, switch to IPTV. And that's our recommendation, is that you switch to IPTV. We have an IPTV product that makes it easy too. So if that's something that you're considering, if you're a cable operator, give us a call. You'll see our contact information at the end here. So that's another benefit of getting rid of that. And that's what he's talking about here, is they can go ahead and do high node splits and move toward maybe extended spectrum DOCSIS, even if they don't go all the way to full duplex. They can go to extended spectrum DOCSIS, and with that, with those high splits, they can start getting up to speeds of, you know, 4 or 5 gigabits per second download, 6, 7, 8, maybe not up to 10G, but they can do that just by basically going down the road of DOCSIS 3.1 and using maybe something like, I say, a high split. So that's an option for them, and they're seeing that as in their, and a lot of cable operators are seeing that in their current footprint where they have HFC. They're trying to figure out how they can squeeze the most out of that, because they might be able to do that for $100 per home passed, or maybe $200 per home passed, depending on how far they go in that path, versus having to rip all of that out and put in fiber. So you've got that last mile problem of putting in the fiber and then taking out, you know, using different equipment, that kind of thing. So that's the way the cable operators are thinking, and Charter's doing the same path here. And altogether, he touted this infrastructure's ability to support symmetric upload and download speeds in the future. He rejected the idea that people need fast uploads in the next 2 to 3 years. So he's talking there about maybe full duplex with DOCSIS 4.0, so that the infrastructure, the HFC infrastructure, can support that, but he rejects the idea that people need that. And that really is true. If you talk to cable operators, they'll tell you. And in fact, I did a story about this the other day. It was something that Cable Labs did. Cable Labs did a test of, they basically simulated what it was like to have in the home, I think it was 10 webinar kinds of things, like 10 kinds of Zoom calls. They used a couple of different I think there was Zoom, I think there was Google Meet, and one other that they were using in their testing. And they tested out as if you had 10 of those going at once, plus additional bandwidth on top of that, and something like a 50 by 10, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was 50 megabits per second on the download, and then maybe it was 10 megabits per second on the upload, was more than sufficient. And cable operators will tell you that you really don't need a gig right now. Even if you've got like 4K TVs and several things going on at once, 50 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second would be plenty. Certainly 100 megabits per second would be plenty for that. So a lot of it's marketing. You've got fiber out there coming out and saying, hey, you got really fast speeds, and hey, it's fast both ways. Well, especially on the upload. While upload has gotten more important recently, and maybe a 10-to-1 is not quite right, you don't necessarily need the kind of upload speeds that are being touted out there. So it's a marketing checkbox. These symmetrical speeds are, it's something. The main reason to have that would be to check it off because your competitor has it. As they say here, it's a marketing claim. He said it's a claim without much reality from a use perspective, and that is the case for pretty much everybody they can get by. So let's see, Charter does not advertise upload speeds. They see the range from 10 megabits per second to 35 megabits per second on consumer plans, so they're not that fast there. In Rutledge's view, broadband remains a download-first business. That's true. In which cable holds up well? You can have very fast, very high-capacity networks at much lower cost than going all fiber. And again, that's talking about, when he says much lower cost than talking about all fiber, he's talking about in areas where they have infrastructure now. If they were going to build out something new, they're going to build out fiber. And certainly in the long run, fiber is going to be less expensive as well because you don't have the noise issue like you would have on a cable plant. The further you go out in fiber, if you go fiber deep, then you can get that a little bit, if you go fiber deep, then you're reducing your costs and you get the noise level down. But if you go all fiber, obviously it's better. But the cost-wise, if you're going to rip it all out, it's going to be very, very expensive. Video is actually a big revenue business under a lot of pressure, and we continue to sort of run that business like we have historically, Rutledge said. We pass through the cost increases and basically keep the same margin and customer base that we have. So that's, again, the issue of do you keep pay TV? And they're saying, yeah, we're keeping it, but we're trying to just keep it where it is. They're not doing much to that. There's nothing really to constrain the cost of sports, he said, and that's still the glue that holds the linear business together. So that is something that you hear as people are talking about whether they're going to cut the cord. A lot of times it's sports that is the factor there. So you've got local TV content and then you've got sports content. And those are the main things right now that are keeping subscribers from cutting the cord. Now, there's also some convenience things, and a lot of people that haven't cut the cord yet already are looking at the costs of getting multiple streaming services, and some of them are saying, it's not that much more expensive to have the traditional pay TV service. But again, I think there is an advantage in having an IPTV service, because then you can reclaim all of that spectrum by getting rid of that QAM video service, and you can then increase your speeds, have more spectrum available. Last story today is about the broadband, what they call nutrition labels. So the FCC has been taking comments on that because they are going to be requiring that every service provider have a broadband label, so to speak, so that consumers can easily compare between the different companies that are in their area. And it says here, price speed is all that's needed on FCC broadband labels, industry groups say. So the industry groups that have the service providers, the associations, whatnot, are saying, hey, all we need to really be talking about is speed. A number of broadband providers and industry groups urge the Federal Communications Commission to stick to price and speed on its proposed broadband nutrition labels, arguing the inclusion of other metrics like packet loss could end up confusing customers. Maybe, but see, the interesting thing is that speed is, speed is really probably not the most important thing anymore. As the different applications get more complicated and you've got things like video and voice, packet loss is really important. If you're just surfing the web and you lose a few packets, okay, so the web page loads a little bit more slowly. But if you're on the phone, you've got jitter or packet loss, then your experience is immediately noticeable. Same thing with video. You don't want to have jitter on your video or packet loss if you're if you're streaming. So that's very important. So I would say I think they're trying to make it easy, but packet loss is important. And a joint comment filing, the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association, that's WISPA, and NTCA, that's the Rural Broadband Association, told the FCC the label should only include actionable information detailing the critical elements of the service consumers are considering, such as price and speed. However, they advised that attempting to include other specifics around packet loss and network management practices could prove pointless. If the category of information is not typically requested by the consumer, then including it in the label will not serve any measured goals. So I think what they're saying is if the consumer doesn't understand it, it's not really meaningful, and therefore it doesn't do anything. But again, it is important information to have. As far as comparing operators, AT&T, Lumen, and US Telecom made a similar argument about packet loss in their own filings. They said, consumers today choose broadband plans overwhelmingly on the basis of price and speed. And that's probably true because that is all they know and understand, because it's not normally advertised, right? So when you're looking at the marketing of two different ISPs and they're saying, well, our speed is this and our price is this, and this one says, well, our speed is this and our price is this, that's what you're comparing. If they were marketing things like packet loss and jitter and latency, then people might compare that. They might not understand as well what it meant, but they still might be comparing that. But you don't see that in the marketing. Consumers do not consider packet loss relevant to their purchase decisions, again, because they don't see it. Indeed, most consumers have no idea what packet loss is, that's probably true, or how to interpret the measurements, and thus could be confused or misled by such data. Well, maybe. I guess, I mean, if you know that, if you see two percentages of packet loss, like is it better if it's high or low? That you need to tell them that. That low would be better, but once you do that, that could be on the label itself. Low packet loss is better. US Telecom backed the inclusion of latency metrics, also important, but said monthly fees aside from equipment fees should be lumped together in an other monthly fees category. AT&T agreed latency was fine to include, but said the FCC should note, they must mean not, FCC should not require this to be based on peak usage times, but instead use a metric based on 24-hour averages. So they don't want you to measure latency during peak usage hours. So, again, if you've got a gamer that's wanting to game during peak usage hours, he's going to be really interested in latency. So I think it needs to be measured at all times and somehow be able to compare those things. Meanwhile, the Fiber Broadband Association pressed the FCC to add a spot to the label specifying what network technology a provider is using, citing evidence that consumers are increasingly interested in this data. So that's the Fiber Broadband Association, right? So they're wanting to say, hey, they should see that this provider is using fiber, and this one is using DSL, and this one is using cable modem, and this one is maybe 5G fixed wireless. Because they know fiber is the one that everybody hears about and is probably going to want because, oh, fiber is fast. People think that. So they're wanting that in there as well. There's more sufficient evidence in the market that consumers recognize there are differences in technologies delivering broadband service and use that information in selecting a broadband provider. So that was the FBA's quote right there. So again, latency is another one. They're saying, yeah, you can include latency. But latency right now, unless you've got a specific application like gaming or something like that, that is actually less important than something like packet loss. Packet loss is really important because packet loss means, again, that you've got these services that people are using today, like a video or voice, that you've got real-time communication going on, and any packet loss means that packet is dropped on the floor, is not replaced, and therefore you get jittery phone calls and video. Whereas latency, a lot of times the buffering can overcome that. So I think latency, packet loss, and speed, all these things should be important. All right. Well, thanks for joining me. Lois, thanks. I'm glad breaking this down is helpful for you. Yeah, cable overpriced. A lot of times the different broadband, it's overpriced depending on where you are and who the competitors are. But again, some of the money that's coming out with the infrastructure program is going to require that there be a low-priced offering from anybody that takes that money. So that will help. Plus, you've got the ACP for those that are low income that can apply for that today. and get at least $30 towards their broadband. And if they've got that low cost option, that will help. So thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, Lois found it helpful, thanks for joining me. Give me a like on this video if you would. And if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button and ring the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. And I'm live every day doing a broadcast, not necessarily about general broadband stuff, but specifically about broadband infrastructure and broadband deployment kind of projects and money that's coming out. So I will be back tomorrow with that for broadband deployment news. So I'll see you then. Bye-bye.